Hey everybody, welcome back to Dr. Cammy and Karen Go Keto, where Cammy and I are on a mission to transition from a standard American diet to a carnivore ketogenic diet. And today we are joined by our wonderful guest, Mike Collins, sugar-free man, who has a wonderful program on cutting out the sugars. I think that kind of helps with cutting out binging or binge eating. And we are happy. This is, I don't know, like our seventh video maybe with you, Mike.
Yeah, yeah,
So thank you and welcome back.
well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. The courage that you guys are displaying is amazing. It's like opening people to a therapist's office. You're just very courageous and attacking something that many people want to do: weight loss and health, getting their health back. So, congrats.
Yeah, thank you so much. Getting rid of sugar, getting rid of the addictions, I don't stand alone in that issue. So that's one of the
Not at
reasons
all.
I'm here, you know.
And I think too, we started this channel in August of 2023. And I think that Cami and I both had this idea that we were going to transition to a ketogenic lifestyle pretty quickly. And that is not the case. And neither of us, we don't care about that because we were committed to, it's a transition, it's a lifestyle, it's what we're adopting for the rest of our lives. So it is going to be in place for the rest of our lives. But since I've had COVID, I've had a couple of pieces of toast because I lost my sense of taste. And when I was out eating, I thought, oh, well, maybe that'll help. And it's funny how quickly you can go back into habits that, I mean, don't think I had toast for ages. And now all of a sudden, I had two pieces of toast, one last week and one this week. So, and it's, to me, it's important. Don't beat yourself up about it. Go back on track. And I got a lifetime. Kelly Hogan talks about her transition to the carnivore diet, which I think she's been on for 15 years. And she said, the first few years she didn't even give up Diet Coke, I don't think, for 5 years.
Yeah, and the other day I got some, they were so good. It was bacon wrapped shrimp. And I said no rice and no beans, but when they packaged it, they wanted it to look pretty, so they put just a little bit of rice like in the bottom. And I ate some of that rice. They had this little tiny fork, and I ate like 6 bites in this tiny fork of rice. And then the next day, which I think was yesterday, I just wanted more carbs, and I just thought, wow, 6 bites of rice will do that, and Mike, you talk about how sensitive people are to caffeine and how, and I just thought, oh, yeah, whatever. And it's really, I think, true that you can get yourself really sensitive. And if you're on a really pretty, like I'm on a pretty strict carnivore diet, I could tell that was in my system,
No,
just those 6 bites. I had some,
likely likely the bacon wrapped shrimp. It's near impossible to get bacon in a restaurant that isn't bacon with sugar in it. So that was probably part of it too. I mean, if you do it at home with you know, Whole 30 bacon, no sugar bacon kind of thing, you're fine. But getting in a restaurant, even at breakfast, it's I don't think it's possible, genuinely. I mean, you would have to get down to the granular level of asking the chef and seeing the package, because even they don't know. They don't even realize it has bacon and they don't care. I mean, it has sugar.
So, Mike,
right.
in your coaching, Mike, Cami and I both mentioned something. I mentioned toast and Cami mentioned rice and you've mentioned bacon. And those are things that maybe a lot of people don't even go, sugar. Well, rice isn't sugar. Bread's not sugar. So in your coaching, and I know when we've talked about Cammy's binging, a lot of that was the, ice cream and cookies and stuff like that. So clearly things that we consider sweets and we consider sugars. But, from the years, Cammy and I know that turns into glucose quickly in the bloodstream, and so does bread. What is your experience with people when they come to you? Is it mostly like candy, or is it just like, "Oh, yeah, it's not just candy. We gotta look at that bread basket. We gotta look at that chips basket."
Good question. And it does scare people off when they come to our program, because they are thinking about the sugar. They're thinking about the candy, the blatant sugar products, ice cream and such, soda. But and this is a big but, the carbohydrates, typically we talk about ultra processed carbohydrates, meaning breads and what have you. But the rice and the potatoes and the starchy vegetables, these things spike the glucose, and your brain is just so conditioned that all of these things are mixed together that it keeps the cravings alive for the sugar. It's almost like drinking beer all day and, then you're headed to the whiskey at night kind of thing, or looking for cocaine when the bar's closed. It's like it is, they're tied together, as are artificial sweeteners, the taste of sweet. You get that glucose spike from the pasta and the bread, and your brain is like, this is usually with a candy bar. I used to get this spike. Where's the fructose and where's the actual sugar? So, yeah, they are all tied together. And our only job together is get people to see 90 days of 100% abstinence of all this stuff and just see, just see what's going on with their life. Like we've mentioned, the sensitivities that you develop happen pretty quickly. I'm more interested I want to frame it more as a healing. You're healing very rapidly, and now you're seeing what your actual body does minus the heavy inundation of, sugar, fructose laden sugar. You see that we have around our program something called borderline foods, and borderline foods have 4 different categories: dairy, grains, fruit and fruit juices. Dried fruit and fruit juices, you might as well not even try, because I shouldn't even have them on there. And what's the last one? Nuts and nut butters. And what happens is folks heal up from the straight sugar, the hard stuff, let's call it that. They heal up a little bit, and then they're eating like full bags of pistachios and full bags of pecans and whatever. And it's talking to them from the cupboard, have more, have more. They get a little obsessed with it because you've healed from the powerful or the heavy stuff, and the little bit of fructose that's in pistachios. It's the highest fructose nut on the market, or pecans. People don't realize these things they're not even nuts. They're the seeds of fruits, and they're hybridized for sweetness to take the bitterness out, and they're high in fructose. So anyway, it truly is, and you open the podcast with the definition or the description of it is a spectrum. It takes time to heal up, and to get to the other side. And along the way, there are going to be things that you're going to find sensitivities to. Everybody's a little different. Some people can have dairy, no problem, but some can't.
Yeah, dairy's a tough one for me. I love dairy. I love all forms of dairy. And I think it just continues me to have cravings and makes it more difficult to be on the path that I'm on. So I'm trying to, do you have any other suggestions for like a cup of coffee in the morning? Like I started doing pulling where I have my little, coconut oil with the little mint in it. And I swish it around in my mouth for 10 minutes and get rid of all the germs, and my mouth is all fresh and everything. Then I go straight for a decaf cup of coffee. And so I pulled the pulling in so that I would get rid of the coffee, but it didn't work. I just followed it. And so I was thinking like maybe a cup of hot water with some lemon in it might be something that I would like.
Yeah, that would work. I mean, it does get a little high in fructose when you're heating fructose from the lemon. There's not a lot in a lemon, but I mean, I'm kind of tough on this. People get mad at me a little bit, but I would do the best you could to transition to water. I mean, I genuinely would. It's just not you're going to find more healing and more peace, I think. That kind of toying with the decaf and stuff. I mean, this is probably a personal opinion, but we do include caffeine in our program simply because it's wired, like chocolate and tea and coffee are always the same reason as the borderline foods. It's wired together in the brain that you got one and where's the other. Your brain is asking, where's the other? And so I would try and make that transition if it's possible. And you'll find you just don't miss it. You know what I mean? And I think that the main thing that we've I mean, I think a lot of people, we had a meeting last night and this exact topic was brought up. You know, it's that having to have something, like having to have coffee or tea or sugar or whatever, you know, having to have it. And a lot of it is performance based, meaning like you got to have it to wake up or, you know, have a meeting, go to a meeting or whatever. And again, your body will get more sensitive to caffeine. A lot of people give up caffeine because they can't drink caffeine without having sugar to come down or relieve the anxiety at night, right? They have to have it because they're drinking coffee half the day, and then at night they can't keep drinking or they won't sleep. And so they have sugar to come down. It's a self-medication. It's, you know, admittedly on the lower, theoretically, and this is why it bugs me, you know, it doesn't get the respect. It's on the lower end of the spectrum. You know, it's not doing speed all day and have to drink all night, but it is, once you realize how sensitive we really are, it does affect you and your anxiety and your sleep and such. So anyway, I don't mean to be a hard ass or anything, but I would try that if you could.
Cammy, I would also recommend that if you have the ritual of doing the oil pulling and then having the coffee, that you change the ritual to something that's not something that's going into your mouth, right? Like leaving your apartment and walking out the door for just a block, walking around the block. Just say, this is my, instead of coffee, I'm going to do this physical activity, or I'm going to go wake up Charlie and play with Charlie for 15 minutes.
That's actually a really good idea. A really good idea.
Yeah.
That substitution of some other thing that creates dopamine. Air squats. I know that sounds crazy, but I've heard so much about this lately that 10 air squats, because it's your legs and there's a lot, I guess, in your calves or something. And it really does give you a little bit of a dopamine jolt, and just 10 times up and down is
So you jump in the air and squat and then
no,
land?
just squat. Just, you know, like you're doing the squat with the weights. Just go down.
Why do you call them air squats?
Well, because you don't have weights on.
Oh, because you don't have weight, so you're just lifting your
Traditionally, you
body.
do it with weights. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I was thinking, God, you jump in the air and squat and land. I'm like, oh, that would really get you going and drive my
That's
lower
called a
neck,
burpee.
my low,
Yeah.
That's
an air burpee.
I don't think your downstairs neighbor would appreciate that at early in the morning.
No, that's exactly what I thought of. I tried to tiptoe around. Yeah, one of you bring up like a story, I was thinking this morning about stories because you know how you were saying you tie the cup of coffee to something that you need to do, like you need to go to a meeting or you need to go to this or, and that's just a story that you make up. So, I'm thinking a lot about stories that I've been making up like my whole life and how I really run my life on a series of stories. And so I'm kind of switching gears here as far as what we're talking about. But the thing I've been doing lately is hitting my pillow, right? So hitting my pillow, getting some anger out. And then right after that comes crying a lot very quickly. And I'm realizing that I don't even necessarily have to start hitting the pillow. I can just start thinking about things that have caused me a lot of hurt and pain and cry. And so I was doing that last night. I'm like, I have this meeting, I have this, taping tomorrow. I should do some of this because it's not something I really look forward to, but it is something that I think has been helpful for me. And I was thinking about how I have so many stories that I live by from the past and that it just continues to cause you to have the hurt and the pain and the hurt and the pain over and over and over. And that by changing those stories and by really not putting the stories in, like Karen and I think we're talking about this the other day on our other video about how, something happens and you put all this meaning to it. But really the reality is that something just happened. And so you can change, what your meaning is or what your perception is, or just have a neutral mind about it. Like, oh, I went and sat in this chair and, it made me feel sad to sit in that chair and see the view that I saw. Instead, you just say, oh, I went and sat in that chair and I saw this view. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I've heard, I'm a huge believer in story, both, they say depression in general is just a story you're telling yourself about the past, or anxiety is a story you're telling yourself about the future, right? And so I do believe that actually. But, and this is a big but, the work that we're doing and you're doing, there is a belief, and I do believe that this kind of old trauma gets trapped in the body, trapped in the tissues. You do have to excise it. I don't think, and we talked about this yesterday, I think, and we have talked about it in the past, is that I don't think you have to tie it to an event, an old trauma or a death or a divorce or something. I don't think that has to be tied together. But it's seemingly, from what I've experienced with a lot of folks, is it's free floating. It's just there is you're in pain, you have a pain that is trapped, and it will come out one way or the other. You'll either anesthetize it with sugar or alcohol or something, or you will exercise it out of your body. And so it's that part, I think, is work that can't be skipped, but you don't need to have the old stories with it, I don't think, anymore, because you can ruminate in those and be depressed, or you can visualize a not so great future and have anxiety because it's that, like you're saying, that story you're telling. But, another quick background for what Cammy is talking about is that we call the process living in process, meaning you become able or aware. It's actually a skill set at some level that is, when you're having angst or anxiety or worry or fear or guilt or something, you're able to process it in a different way that doesn't include a substance, right? Doesn't include sugar or alcohol or whatever. It doesn't include a substance. So what she's talking about, beating the pillow, is this kind of, you get on, you know, you get on the bed and you just, if you're feeling down, and you pound the pillow and you pound the bed and kick your feet and kick your arms, and sometimes the tears flow. And it's something that adults, we learn very early on, especially in codependent or difficult households, the whole "don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about" thing. It's like we learn to control it. Like we learn to we have a mechanism, and nobody knows about where it comes from, but we can shut our crying down, we can shut our emotions down, and it traps them. It allows them to be stuffed down and not felt, right? And what we're dealing with is a huge backlog of them, a backlog of the feelings that we never experienced because we had a lot of different ways to shut it down, including sugar, including other things, sex and gambling and workaholism. There's a lot of ways to shut it down and not feel. And we, as adults, a lot of us have become proficient in this ability, or whatever. And so the goal is to live in a process where you just feel it when it comes through. And sadly, there is a backlog that needs to be worked through. Again, no one knows what or how much, and everybody's different, but pounding the bed and pillow is a very safe way to do it. And very cathartic after you do it. I don't know. Have you experienced that, Ken?
Yes, I have felt, calmer afterwards and more hopeful, a little more energy. Sometimes I feel ridiculous in there doing it when I start, I'm like, this is so silly, but I can, I pretty much always get tears out of it. And it's interesting because, like in the past, if I thought too hard, like if I really thought hard about what happened when my second son passed away and everything that happened after that, ending the marriage because of what was going on there, and selling the house because that was the only way to get my husband out of it, and, moving to a condo, just all these things that had to happen, getting a new job because my boss was a jerk, just on and on. In a series of like 18 months, all these things happened. And it was very difficult to go through, but I had to go through it. And I was working like 40 to 60 hours a week too. It was very stressful. And so when I think too hard about that in the past, I get super overwhelmed and I just, the tears just come. But I was thinking about it last night, and that's when I realized that I was feeling like there were stories around it. I was like, well, yeah, it was hard. Yeah, but look, you're here, right? You're still here. And, you didn't do it perfectly, but you did it great. You didn't drink, you didn't get high, you didn't do all those, you drown yourself in sugar, and that's okay. This is something that you're working on getting out of. So it just feels like it feels like I'm healing.
Yeah, it does feel like it's just coming out. It's just like you start to realize that that this phenomena exists and it's real. Had I not lived it myself and worked, 100 people through it, like I would not have believed it before. So it's, and, again, there's a minor cult developed around the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and other books that have come from that, who all give credit to that author, that this is a real phenomena for trauma sufferers. Or, and again, it doesn't have to be sexual trauma or the death of a child like yours is pretty severe. And so there's work to be done there, I think. And, but it can just be bullying at high school, or, I like the phrase Gabor Mate says, it's not what happens to you, it's how you deal with what happens to you, and how you experience it. Something that would be trivial to one person and not a big deal is, it's really hard for another person, and they shut down and go to the sugar or whatever their drug of choice is. So yeah, it's interesting, and again, this living in process, if you will, it has to be done, because this is where I see the biggest stumbling blocks for everyone, because they get to a certain point without guidance and thinking it's a diet after they've restricted, and these feelings begin to emerge, and the feelings aren't hard, they're hard to identify, like hard to identify in your body, hard to identify what's going on. It's kind of like an amorphous impending doom or ill feeling or mal-ease, but it's not easy to identify. And so you got to just, whatever it is, try and let it out and try and locate it in your body. And it's this work that I think is the missing piece in the diet industry, because no one talks about this after the decades of ingesting sugar to unconsciously manage our emotional life. And so, yeah, it's interesting, and you're very courageous to, experiment with it and try and see how it works for you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And so
I have
go
to
ahead.
interrupt. I'm gotta leave because the nurse is here, so I'll try to pick back up if he leaves soon, but otherwise, everybody, good. Keep going. Keep doing the good work.
Right.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Karen.
Bye bye.
So, I was going to say that could also be me just holding on to my small amount of caffeine, because, I've noticed that I'll try to pull away, I'm a little nervous about getting off of it completely, because like, it's kind of like, what's going to come after that. But that's going to, I think there's more healing to do by pulling off of that last little bit. It's like when I went through not that long ago. I mean, it was maybe 6 months ago, not even. I had to go through my cupboards and take out every single thing that had every little thing of sugar in it, because I had things in there that were like, well, it's not the first four ingredients. It's not, the top, it was like salad dressing that had sugar in it. And I was like, well, it's just at the end of the list, right? But it had sugar in it, and it was, condiments, and, it was things that, so getting rid of that completely is what I think really helped me get over the hump to start being able to get into ketosis and, doing this carnivore diet, and to really be feeling like I can get to the root cause of these, stories and feelings that I have that have created me to binge.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a very adult thing. And I think you're, 35, 40 days into this. And if we can get you to 60 with this, as close to the 100% abstinence, just water and whole food, you're going to see remarkable results. If we hadn't done as many detoxes as we have and worked with as many people, I don't know that I'd be able to say this, but it's very real. I mean, people almost never go back when they can they can try to get that 90 in, and just heal up enough so they lose a little bit of weight, enough weight to see some results, and that their cravings for things are almost non-existent now, and they've developed some new systems for handling when emotional stuff comes up. They go for a walk or go to yoga or lift weights or something and get a hug. So
Go cry.
go cry and let it out. It's yeah, I mean, it's a new paradigm a little bit, but it's turning out to be very valuable for the folks that give it a try.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, people get stuck in the macros and the portions and the food, and yeah, you got to eat whole food and you can't eat powdered stuff. But beyond that, the work, quote unquote, is very different than what people perceive the work of weight loss or, behavioral change in this way. They don't think it has anything to do with pounding a bed and crying. That's not on their radar at all when they first start doing this stuff. But
Well, and
it does come up, and they don't know what it is, and they unconsciously say to themselves, "Well, I'll just have a soda. I feel like a soda, or I have, and then they stop. The whole process stops, and they never get through it."
right. And, I think that you talk about how a lot of people in your program are like women like me who are, postmenopausal, 40 to 80 years old in that age group. And I think as you're younger and you go through things, you can lose weight. Like when I wanted to have, my last son, I was really motivated and and I was older and, 37 or 38 or something. And I didn't want to I think I was 36 when I got pregnant with him, but I was motivated to get the weight off for certain reasons. And, so there were times in my life where I was successful in getting weight off because I was motivated for some certain event or some, certain issue that's going on. And I know I'm not alone in that situation. But, the weight's going to come on again later unless you address the emotional issues that are all behind it.
Bingo.
And that's where you have to really do the work, you have to pound the pillows and get into counseling and talk about things. And, like you were saying, it's not necessarily a big T trauma, but even just the way you were raised, the way a lot of us were raised, like kids are to be seen and not heard. And, the milieu of the environment that you were in.
Yeah.
So you're not even aware of what's happening because you just think it's this way everywhere.
Right. So what you're describing is super interesting to me because there is a statistic that pretty much everyone now, it's pretty common knowledge, understands that 95% of all people lose any amount of weight, gain it all back in the first year. And you're like, why? How is that possible? What's the deal? And so if we kind of overlay it, what we've been talking about, here's the process. So every diet plan that has ever been written has some ingredient that says quit the white stuff. So you quit the white stuff, and every diet plan has a component that says exercise, burn it off, like burn calories, quote unquote, which is all just total BS. But if you look at it through the lens of what we've been talking about today, and a lot in our other episodes, is that people begin the restriction, then they begin the exercise, and the exercise is their salve, their process and their ability to stop the emotions, right? But then they get an injury, or they can't exercise that week, or they can't exercise that, and then the feelings begin to come and they can't get out on the exercise or go lift weights or whatever. And they don't have any other methods. And then all of a sudden they're back doing the sugar. And you've heard it. I mean, if I had heard this once, I've heard it thousands of times, is that, well, I just had one soda or one slice of pie, and all of a sudden I was back to the races and couldn't stop again. Right. And so they didn't get their healing and their exercise stopped. So they didn't have even that way. And so it's really easy to explain if folks would listen through the whole process and they could understand why they keep yo-yoing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and we've talked also about how exercise is important, not as a form of burning calories, but as a form of getting your dopamine hit and, really taking care of yourself that way. And that's the other component of this, I think, is, beefing up your self-care and
Yes.
really looking at, what I call ALKs, acts of loving kindness, that you need to do to yourself on a regular basis. And, you know, and it's simple little things like, last night I started reading a book that's like a novel. And I always read self-help books or, I'm always a seeker, to seek knowledge. And so I started this, little book and I'm really looking forward to just, having downtime kind of like that to just kind of, you know, have some
Yeah, most
fun.
people are not, I mean, I don't want to be generalizing because I think there's a wide swath of the population, and we do have this one group that we have, like you described, that are women between I like to say 40 and 80, but it's probably closer to 50 and 80 who have struggled with sugar their whole life, and they don't like they've helped their husband and their boss and their kids, and taking care of themselves is a little foreign to them. It feels a little guilty. Now, they've always known that they should take care of themselves, and the way that they dealt with that upset or that, I don't want to say outrage, but that feeling like I should be taking care of myself, that they have a little sugar that night, or whatever that day. And then they wake up and the kids are gone and maybe the husband's gone, but they, they're still not very good at they feel guilty taking care of themselves. They feel guilty going to the gym and not going to the grandkids or whatever. So it's an interesting, again, the work, quote unquote, is very different than people have been brainwashed to believe by the diet industry. Eat less and exercise more. The work are the things we're talking about here. you know, Stick up for yourself, say no, self care, let the emotions out. This work is the work of weight loss, the work of transformational change, pattern change, so that you don't do the same thing over and over again. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the only way to do this is to keep beating the drum here. And, you're doing it now, you're walking through it and seeing these things, and you're feeling these feelings, and you're dealing with them in a way that doesn't include sugar. So, kudos to you. And, um, there's no way through but through, or what is it? There's no way to get there but through. You got to go through it.
You can't go around it.
Can't go around it. Yeah. You can't exercise your way out of this. You just can't. There's no,
I know that was the one thing I always wished I would have done was gotten addicted to exercise,
yeah.
but I never did. But that's a band-aid on a dam. That's just one other way to mask it.
Exercise addiction is scary a little bit. I've only known a couple, two, three real exercise addicts. I mean, one woman, they used to go to different gyms because they wouldn't allow her in. And one of my friends who owned a yoga studio wouldn't let a woman come in because she was basically coming to every hot yoga class twice a day or something, I don't know, just sweating for, and she was anorexic essentially, but wasn't really anorexic because she ate. So she was an exercise addict. It's just as annoying or just as detrimental emotionally and obviously physically. Yeah. So tell
Right.
me more about pillows. Tell me more about crying. Tell me more about let's I don't want to I just tell me how you feel and how you bring it on and how you know you should go there, and help the people with that. Help the people to understand how to do it. Now, I don't want to say how to do it because everybody's a little different, but you have to have a safe space and you have to
Mhm.
not hold it back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, I just have my little pony thing, like a stick pony that has a dinosaur head on the end. And that's what I bought to hit the pillows with because they didn't have a bat at the store. And so I just started, physically hitting the pillows with it and then harder and harder and harder. And then trying to get out my anger, because I really thought I had a lot of anger in me, but it seems to be that I don't have as much anger as I thought I did.
Okay.
It's more hurt for me because I just kind of consider myself one of those HSPs, highly sensitive people. I mean, it's a name, it's a, you don't really, just very sensitive always in my life ever since I can remember. And so when I start hitting the pillow with the dinosaur head, then I feel kind of stupid. I feel like kind of, why am I doing this? But then comes up like all of these things that I'm like, okay, well, what am I angry about? And I tend to be angry at two different things, like, which are, one of the things is stuff that happened as I was growing up in this large, in this family with 7 kids, and it was very dysfunctional. And my mother was narcissistic, and it was all about getting her needs met. And so life was very precarious and uncertain because you never knew what her needs were going to be on that particular day at that particular time. And then some other things that happened later, after my second son passed, I have a lot of grief and sadness and trauma from everything that happened there. And so then I can think about either one of those situations, and it make, I cry. I start to cry over a lot of the hurt that I had from all of that, and how when I was younger, I felt so misunderstood, and people, it was just a busy place, and there wasn't really time for people to try to understand me. And so I just kind of cry over some of that. And then last night was not really such a good cry because it wasn't long. It wasn't really super intense, but I do feel like as I'm crying, I'm able to, things feel like I'm doing like a letting go, like a little catharsis of, you don't have to hold this in. It feels to me like a holding, like a tightness in my chest a little bit,
Okay.
And then like sometimes it's hard to breathe because if I'm crying too hard, then, you have to stop and you have to take a breath, you know? So I just do what I need to do as far as keeping myself, crying and breathing. And then sometimes it'll lead to other things. Like I'll be thinking, oh, this hurt me so bad. And then, oh yeah, then this happened, that hurt me. And then, so I'll cry over some other things. And then I'll realize that, like yesterday, I really realized that I don't necessarily have to cry over these things forever. Like they were things that happened. And yes, I was hurt. And yes, I did not, as I grew up, I did not have healthy coping mechanisms to cope with things in a healthy way. And so I used whatever I could get my hands on, which initially was food. And then it was sex or drugs or alcohol or whatever else it was. And now I have healthier coping mechanisms in place for when things happen to me that hurt me, and I can speak my truth and I can communicate with people. I still don't do that well, like confrontational conversations or things where I have to, say what's important to me, or even like you were saying about, putting your foot down and saying, I need to go to exercise class instead of spend time with other people or on the phone, or I don't have grandkids yet, but those other kinds of things. And so being willing, and so like I feel like things are better already just by crying it out, because I'm realizing that I'm in a much better place now and I have more control, over. I remember I couldn't wait to turn 18 because I would have control over my life, like legally. And I actually, when I turned 18, I remember thinking, I can't wait till I turn 18 because then I can eat as many candy bars as I want. I remember that.
Wow.
I remember that thought. And then when I turned 18, my mom made me start paying rent to stay in my house because she needed the money. And I thought, I'm just so glad I didn't go shack up with some guy somewhere, because I could have done that, but I started paying. It was only like $50 or something. It wasn't a lot of money. And she needed the money for, electricity bill and, that the electric bill and all that stuff. So I started paying $50 a month to live in my own house.
Well, a couple of things. Like, I'm real interested in the starting, or when it's coming, or what it is, or how to identify it. Something you never did before. That was interesting. And any parts of that you can flesh out, it'd be great. And then,
Like, what do you mean? Like the crying, like when it
yeah,
starts?
like the starting. And I think what you've developed, which I think is possible, is that you can almost bring it on at will now with the dinosaur head or whatever. You go in and you just, even if you're not really quote unquote in the mood, you may be just feeling a little malaise or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're like in there, instead of going for a walk with the dog, pound the pillows or whatever. My mentor used to call it hitting the mats. You know what I mean? It's like, and so bringing it on at will, making it a process, a conscious process, as opposed to reaching for sugar as an unconscious process to deal with it, right? And this is, again, the work, quote unquote. So that's interesting. And the second part of it, the second part of the interest part is the actual feelings and, what you're thinking, and like, is it tied to something like an experience, a death of the son or something, that kind of part. And I think you've kind of sussed that out a little bit, that doesn't necessarily have to be that story. It's just an emotion that's trapped. And it could be two things at the same time, crying that you shut down at the funeral, crying that you shut down when you're talking at work.
Yeah,
And
work was tough.
yeah, so now you're letting it out, and this is the work, this ends up being the work. So yeah.
There was a lot. You're bringing back a lot of memories because when my second son passed away, an OBGYN doctor, I had a lot of patients that I would see every year for their annual. And so for the first year, I had to remind all these people that, these like are people that I knew that were like had a relationship with, and they would come in and they would say, "Oh, how's your baby doing? How's your son?" And I would have to tell them that, he had passed away. And, they'd say, "How are your kids doing?" And, so for a year, I had to go through that whole thing
Oh,
every day,
yeah.
and sometimes it would be, 3 or 4 annuals in one day of these people that knew me. And I would have to tell them, these things. And so, there was a lot of putting it on the shelf. And when you said that, like, I'm good at putting my emotions on the shelf because that's what you had to do growing up, right? You just had to put them on the shelf, just up they go. And so now it's kind of, I am learning how to just pull it off of the shelf and get it out. Let's pull it off the shelf and put it down here. Like the other day, I was in a yoga class and it's for this senior yoga, and she's very slow, and it's a great class. It's a lot of stretching and just using your body. And she has this accent that is very calming and soothing. And she was saying, and just ask yourself, what do you need today? How do you love yourself today? How do you take good care of yourself today? And when she said, take good care of yourself, I wanted to start crying in the middle of class. And so I was like, okay, well, just put it on the shelf. And tonight you can pull it back down and look
Mm.
at that. Because when she talks about taking good care of yourself, I'm like, I'm a novice at that. Like I was cut loose at 8 years old because my parents, I don't know, I guess trusted my judgment or whatever. But taking good care of myself is just like a really super cool thing that I'm learning how to do. So yeah, I'm able to kind of compartmentalize it, because that's how so many of us did that as a way of survival growing up.
Okay, so you're bringing up another point that's real important, which is this. You recognize that you did shut it down in yoga class, and you recognize where, and you recognize why, and you recognize how, or, some of how. I like your put it on the shelf, right, phraseology or whatever. And so we need to, folks need to learn to stop doing that. Like if it's happening, to go the other way and actually hit the mats, hit the pillow, hit and let it out. And I think we talked about this once before. I think the yoga is an okay place to do that. And I've seen and I've heard yoga teachers speak of this kind of spontaneous things, almost like they stretched a muscle, the emotions were in the muscle, and then they just started crying. Like they weren't thinking about it before. Like, and I've seen this or heard about it and experienced it a couple times with, in yoga classes. And I think yeah, I mean, it's just, again, more of a identifying patterns that were previously subconscious, and behaviors and coping mechanisms that were previously subconscious. And once they're, the light of day is on them, it's not that hard to fix. I think the last part, one of the things is in this process is that you don't take on any more backlog. You're cleaning you're cleaning your shelves, and you're not having to build new shelves, right?
And that's important because that comes along with communication in my mind, like communicating to others or, saying, well, that doesn't sit well with me because I'm sensitive about that subject, or, just figuring out, because I'm not very good at communicating in general, and then trying to communicate my feelings and my emotions to other people is, especially in the moment, that's a big one. I get afraid, it's like, just clam up,
I'm exactly like you. I mean, the hard conversations where you are not taking care of yourself because someone's overreaching or whatever it is, like those are the ones that we stuff. We're angry at ourselves, we're angry at them, we don't want to tell them, and we use sugar or whatever other processes to not feel that, because it's a nasty feeling. Like, you're driving home, he's like, I didn't take care of myself, and I don't like that request, and you don't ever tell them. You just kind of stuff it and have a little sugar and don't feel that nasty feeling. And so I keep saying that. I stole it from Byron Katie, The Work. It's like the work is different than people think it is. They think it's restrict and kill yourself with exercise, but the work is what we're talking about. So, yeah.
All right.
Well, very cool. I mean, this is no tears, but that's okay because you kind of know now what's going on with this, and you can bring them up at will and excise them. I like it.
It's not that simple, but
Yeah, well, I don't think we ever fully know how to do it, but we try.
yeah. I'm doing a good job of it. So yeah, thanks to your help. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for being so brave.
All right, everybody, keep doing the work, man. Just keep doing the work.
Keep doing it. Take care.
We'll see you next time.